Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktivinoda, Jaya Bhaktivinoda. Jaya Satchidananda, Jaya Bhaktivinoda, Satchidananda, Jaya Bhaktivinoda. Jaya Satchidananda, Jaya Bhaktivinoda, Sachidananda Jaya bhaktivinoda Jayam Vishnupat Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astotrasata Shishiman Siddhivangesta Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur appearance Ki Jayam Vishnupat Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astotrasata Shishiman Siddhivangesta Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Stotarasita Sisiman Hivangis ISKCON Founder Acharya Jagadguru A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Anandakari Vaishnavranna Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends, Lord Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Shyam Kumar Radha Kunda Giri Garavadam Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mathura Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Ganges Mai Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Itai Gaura Premanandi. All glory to assembled devotees, all glory to assembled devotees, all glory to assembled devotees, all glory to Sri Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Appear in Maha Mahotsava Ki Jai. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pita Bhutara Simati Bhakti Chita Shanti Krishna Prabhupada Sita Sri Gaura Kutana Sakti. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitanjena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sapitanjena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Jati Swapadantikam Pandeham Sri Vasidit Parakamla Sri Guru Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagajatam Savagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Jana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lolita Sri Visakantam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapakanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaswari Prisavan Sutidevi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpataru Vyascha Kripa Sundubhya Vacha Pachitanam Pavanivyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Hare Krishna. Reading from the 7th Goswami. a biography of His Divine Grace, Srila Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakura, a birth and infancy. During the time his father was away, Kedarnath was born in Birinagar, Ulagram, or Ula. At the time of his birth, an astrologer sat marking the time with an hourglass, and an English account of the time was also kept. Kedarnath was born at the time of the British East India Company's ascendancy. The last powerful Muslim ruler, Shah Alam, had lived only to see the troops of the British East India Company march into Delhi in 1803. In the first half of the 19th century, a number of wars of conquest were waged by the British. The Marathas, who had previously become very powerful under their king, Shivaji, were crushed in 3 ruining wars. Their confederacy was thus broken, and with it, any hopes for self-rule by 1818. From 1818 to 1857, during the time Kedarnath came of age, was educated. The British fought a number of wars of an exaction, and by 1857, almost 2/3 of the subcontinent had fallen to them. Bengal, and especially Calcutta, was the hub of the East India Company's trading operation. Kedarnath's maternal grandfather, an aristocratic landholder, was fabulously wealthy. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura described in his autobiography, "My maternal grandfather had incomparable wealth and a grand estate. There were hundreds of male and female servants. When I was born, I was a good weight. I had an older brother, Abayan Kali, who had previously died, and a second brother, Kali Prasanna, was still living. I was my father's third son. It was said that of all my brothers, I was a little ugly. But my mother said, 'Very well, let this boy be the servant of the rest. Just let him live a long time.' My brother told me that when I was 8 months old, I got a boil on my thigh. And as a result, I became weak and emaciated. I also heard that while I was being carried in the arms of my nurse, Sibu, down a flight of stairs, I cut my tongue on my teeth. To this day, I have a scar on my tongue. This happened around the time my teeth were coming in. When the boy was almost 2 years old, his father returned from Odisha. His nurse later told him that a few days before his return, The boy saw a crow flying to a perch, and he composed a rhythm. Kak kal, jing gira fall, baba aseta, nade baso. Oh crow, kal, flower of the jinga squash, father comes, sit aside. As he spoke, the crow changed his position. Some people nearby noticed this and said, "Oh, your father must certainly be coming soon." His father arrived a few days later. Do you understand? Understand? Nothing. Zero? Okay. When a crow comes and perch by somewhere in the house, and making a sound means that a visitor is coming. So even though Bhaktivinoda was a small boy, he knows it. So he was aware that his father was coming. So he composed it. It's a small boy. Just a small boy. A small boy for this body, but not for the soul. He's always eternal associate of the Lord, so he's a Nitya Siddha, so he knows all these things perfectly. Schooling. Kedranath's first school was on the veranda of his maternal grandfather's puja building, where many of the village boys used to gather for their education. The teacher was very forbidding, and the boys were afraid of him. The Thakura says of this, "I have some recollection of going to a school run by Kartik Sarkar when I was 3 years old. Even now it comes to mind that cane he used to show." Did you see that in your childhood? We have. I still remember one of our headmasters. He has a cane, this side. His cane is short. Other teachers, they have a very long cane, but it's only very short. And he calls you Dr. Do-Good. Dr. Do-Good. Yes. Very short cane. He always carry it. When he hit you with it, you feel the pain the whole day. He's one of the headmasters, Mr. Edigbe. I still remember his name. I still remember his name. Mr. Gabriel Edigbe. He has a cane called Dr. Do-Good. And he also has a slogan, which I still remember till today. Do good, do for yourself. Do bad, do for yourself. Thank you. Remember. As I mentioned many times. That is karma. That is karma. The law of karma is well known to Africans. It's not known. We stray a bit that we don't have the philosophy to back it, the scripture to back it, but the remnant of this knowledge is in Africa. So, Mr. Kartik Sarkar has a cane that he always shows it to the student. So bhaktivinoda Thakur remember. There were many festive occasions observed in the house of his grandfather, especially Durga or Jagadatri Puja, which was performed with great pomp. His mother's side of the family were mostly Saktas, worshippers of Durga. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur recalls hundreds of chandeliers will hang on the puja house. Lanterns will be wrapped around all the pillars and columns. All the guards at the doors will be dressed in sepoy uniforms. Numerous stout men dressed in golden embroidered cloth will come from Ranagat and Santipur. Many bodyguards and soldiers used to accompany all these men. In terms of people, the scene was like a forest of humanity. And in terms of light, it was like the Battle of Kurukshetra. The scene was filled with fireworks and rowdy pomp. Late at night, there would be Kavigana singing of poetic compositions. At dawn, I will listen. But the Kaviwalas, the reciters, will scream so loudly that it will hurt my ears. I can remember that we used to have 25 or 30 Brahmanas from West Bengal come and carry the goddess to the place of worship and perform the worship. On the sixth day, 2 types of drums will be beaten and the sun will shake the whole puja house. On the 9th day, many goats and buffalo will be sacrificially killed. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur observed with sardonic humor. Everybody used to enjoy this occasion, except the goats and the buffalo. Most of the Brahmanas and Panditas used to come solely for the taste of mutton. He continues, during Dola Yatra, another annual festival, there was singing and various kinds of sport. So much red dye was thrown about that everything appeared to be blood colored. At this time, even the guard took part in the festivities. They will enter the temple courtyard singing and throwing dye. Because of all their commotion, I will stay a little distance away from them. I will enjoy watching the festival bonfire. When he was 5 years old, he began his schooling, but the school was run by a cruel teacher who constituted a system of punishment utilizing older students, which kept the younger boys terrorized. This is demonic. Those who were a little older used to act as agents to the teacher and would harass the younger among us. If we came late to school, these older boys would apprehend us. The rule was, whoever came to school first was hit with the stick once. Whoever came second was hit twice. And whoever was third was hit thrice times. and the number kept increasing in this way. The routine was as follows. The youngest student used to write their kakagas, ABC, on talpata with black coal. After a year, they will write their numbers on banana leaves, and after that, they made a copy on paper. All the other boys were taught accounting, which was the work of the office of the zamindar. From time to time, under the scrutiny of the teacher, we will learn the deliberation of a court. The youngest boys will lodge a complaint, and their witnesses and evidence will be deliberated upon as in a court. In the end, there will be the determination of punishment. All the decisions of the court had to be confirmed by the teacher. There were different kinds of punishment: twisting of ears, slapping, caning, and paying a fine. We saw our teacher as a personification of Yama, the judge of the dead. And the older student used to act on behalf of the teacher as if agent of Yama. Sometimes this older student will act on their own, and sometimes he will arrange a court on behalf of the teacher. Some boys will make false complaints and bring false witnesses to court, and other boys will administer punishment. At one point, being intimidated by the other boys, Kedranath stole some jackfruit from his home for his teacher. His mother, however, found out and became very angry. When my teacher heard about this, he became frightened. He said that I should only take things that will not be noticed. Don't bring big things. The neighbor's children used to steal tobacco and give it to him. I used to steal soaked chickpeas and give them to him instead. Kedranath's brother, Haridas, who also attended the school, eventually became so furious with the teacher and the boldness of the older boys that he took up a machete and entered the man's home while slept. Kedranath, who chanced to be present, took the machete from him and threw it away. The teacher immediately resigned and departed that very day. Another teacher replaced him. After the end of his 6th year, he attended this Bengali medium school, where he studied as follows. We will begin in the morning by standing and loudly reciting the multiplication tables, addition tables, ganda tables, cowrie tables, and so on. The older student will recite in a loud chorus. First, the older student will together say, 4 cowries make 1 ganda. Then we, in the younger student group, will immediately respond, 4 cowries make 1 ganda. The recitation will proceed in this manner. When it was finished, we will sit down and write it all out. As we wrote, our teacher will often declare, say it, then write it. We will repeat a word in a loud voice and then write it. In the resulting tumult, no one could understand anyone else. Then an English school opened in his maternal grandfather's home, which was started by his grandmother. An Indianized Frenchman named Dhira began to give Kedarnath, his older brother, sleep Kali Prasanna, and some of the other boys English lessons. And a nice relationship developed between Kedarnath and his teacher. During his playtime, he sometimes wandered in his grandfather's gardens and picked ripe mangoes or caught caterpillars of various kinds, which his father used to raise by feeding them appropriate leaves, eventually releasing them as butterflies. There were many beehives in the gardens, and the boys used to break the hives and steal the honey. Kedarnath used to show some restraint in his honey eating, but his brother did not. Their mother used to feel their bodies to see if they were unusually warm from eating honey, and if so, they would be punished. The Thakura recalls. One day the honey bee stung us. My older brother, Kali Prasanna, was an innocent fellow, but the bee stung him so much that he had a fever for several days. His brothers were so rambunctious that they were not satisfied to simply play in their grandfather's ground. They used to venture out and get into trouble. Kedarnath used to sit and talk with the gatekeepers to avoid getting into difficulty with his brothers. The soldiers used to tell him stories and recite the Ramayana, to which Kedarnath was very much attracted, and he began to recite the stories to his mother and maid servant. His mother was pleased and sent some gifts to the gatekeepers. In return, Sritar Toyari, the main storyteller, would share his rotis, flat bread, dal, bean soup, and khichdi, a combination of dal and rice, with Kedarnath, and Kedarnath would become very happy. This incident serves to show how Kedarnath was attracted to hearing about Rama and Krishna from the very beginning of his life, in preference to the playful sports of his brothers. This is a feature in the lives of great souls, as evidenced by the histories of others, like Maharaj Parikshit, Prahlad Maharaj, Uddhava, Narottam Das Thakura, etc., whose childhood are described in the pages of the scriptures. Their primary attraction was to God and was exhibited from the very beginning of their lives. So even though Bhaktivinoda was born in the Kali worshipping family, he was hearing about Ramchandra and Krishna. And while they were doing the worshipping, he doesn't feel part of it. He always stand aside and watch them. But see, he's born in a family that worship Durga as a devotee. A devotee but in a family of Durga worshippers. But he was not influenced by that. He was simply hearing about Lord Ramachandra and Krishna. Sometimes the boy used to wake up at night and talk to the night guards of the inner grounds, particularly one called Officer Naf, who was very old but still used to carry his lantern stick, club, and sword. Officer Naf was a much trusted guard of Kedranath's grandfather. He was fearless and a former dacoit robber. Okay. Kedranath used to ask him many questions. When Naf was a dacoit, he had accidentally beheaded his own guru during a raid. Since that time, he had constantly chanted the holy name of Hari, although only 6 or 7 and incapable of understanding all of Naf's amazing stories. Kedranath liked to hear him talk, not the least of his attractions must have been the almost constant vibration of the holy name issuing from his mouth. Since Kedranath's mother was the daughter of a very wealthy man and was thus unable to tolerate much physical labor, a maid servant named Sibu took care of Kedranath most of the time. She was completely dedicated to the brothers, even more than to her own children. In the morning time, she would serve us a light breakfast and then take us to school. Later in the day, she will bring us rice to eat. At noon, she will find us wherever we were, and supervise us while we took milk. In the evening, she will take us home and put us to bed and lay down herself with us. She will give us her own happiness for our happiness. Even if her own daughter wanted to take her home, she would be reluctant to leave us. There were doctors in residence who used to prepare various Ayurvedic medicines for Kedranath's family members, as well as training students who came to them to study the science. They made various medicines with herbs, as well as special potent formulas, which involved the difficult processes of burning gold, oxidizing iron, and grading precious stones. Sometimes in the late afternoon, Kedranath sat in his father's parlor and told stories to him or had stories from him. At the time of evening prayers, his father would give him sandesh, a milk sweet. Most of the time, though, he stayed with his older brother Kali. His younger brother Goridas, who was very beautiful, was extremely naughty and always in trouble. On certain festival days, buffalo-elephant fights were staged. Huge buffaloes had their horns tipped with iron, and the elephant's tusks were similarly tipped, and then they were set loose to fight. Everyone would watch from the second floor of the buildings. Sometimes the buffaloes would win, and sometimes the elephant. On the other days, the boys would ride atop their personal elephant named Shiv Chandra who will carry them to the places of entertainment during festivals. During this period, his maternal grandfather was so wealthy that anyone in need could come to him for their necessities. The village was a very happy place, and no one lacked anything. Hardly a day passed without some festival taking place. In those days, Ula was free from suffering. There were 1400 good Brahmana families, and there were many Kayasthas and Vaidya families too. No one in the village went without food. One could get by with very little in those days. Everybody was cheerful. People used to sing, make music, and tell entertaining stories. You could not count how many jolly, fat-bellied Brahmanas there were. Almost everybody had a good wit, could speak sweetly, and was skilled in making judgments. Everyone was skilled in the fine arts, song and music. Groups of people could be heard at all times making music and singing, playing dice and chess. If anybody was in need, they could go to the home of Mustafi Mahasaya. His maternal grandfather, and get whatever they required without any difficulty. Medicine, oil, and ghee were plentiful. The good people of Ulagram did not know the need of finding work in order to eat. What a happy time it was. When Kedarnath was 7, the king of Krishnanagar established a college and invited prominent landholders and neighboring kings to send their sons. Kedarnath, Kali Prasanna, his elder brother, and other boys from their family attended. Their nursemaid accompanied them, and they lived in a house in the midst of the bazaar at Krishnanagar. Next door to them lived an oil pressman who was about to die. He had arranged for the daily recitation of Mahabharata. Kedarnath very much liked to hear the stories from the Mahabharata, and the stories about Bhima especially attracted his mind. He humorously observed, on certain days, the speaker will get a lot of things to eat, and those days he will be most eloquent. On those days when he received nothing, his heart will be very depressed. On Saturdays, the boys would be brought home to Ula by palanquin at great speed and happily spend the weekends with their families. Classes at the college were held at the official residence of the district magistrate, and an Englishman named Captain Richardson was the college principal. The son of the king of Krishnanagar, Bahadur Satish Chandra, was Kedarnath's classmate. Kedarnath excelled in English studies and received a class promotion and an award for his scholarship. After this, he was greatly praised all over Ula, especially by his father and maternal grandfather, as well as his mother and other family members. Even his former English teacher, the Frenchman, came for a visit and praised him greatly. Finally, Kedarnath's father put a stop to his being praised in the presence of others. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur observed, hearing all this praise, my pride became much inflated. In my mind, the importance of my reading and writing very soon amounted to nothing. Kedranath's class performance fell off. The teachers began to chastise him, and the envious student gave him a hard time. He felt tormented and could no longer study. Instead of attending classes, Kedranath used to hide in the woods or pretend to be ill. His nanny was no longer present due to the boys having adjusted well to living in Krishnanagar. But one of their servants, a man named Keshi, understood his mind and took his side. Then one day, the boys ate some impure foodstuff prepared by a well-meaning relative. Later that night, Kedranath's elder brother, Kali Prasanna, became ill with cholera. A local doctor declared it very serious, and Kedranath and Kali Dada set out for their home by palanquin. Kali Dada was sinking gradually into the illness. As we crossed the river Ajanta, I made a strenuous effort to pacify his mind. By 8 o'clock the following morning, the palanquin arrived at Ula. An hour after arriving home, the boy left this world, and a great cry of grief went up from the women of the house. After several days, it was decided that Kedranath would remain at home, which was to his dissatisfaction. At this time, he was about 8 years old, and he went for some months without schooling. Soon, however, some respectable men organized an English school in Ula, in the parlor of Kedranath's uncle's house. The boy soon regained his aptitude and proficiency in studying, and his teachers showed him much affection. He used to play cricket, but after being struck on the brow with a bat and bleeding profusely, he gave it up and never played again. He excelled in reading and reciting and learning Bengali and mathematics as well. Kedranath's maternal uncle died, and after that, many inauspicious things began to happen to his maternal grandfather. Numerous expenses came. Swindlers took advantage of the elderly gentleman's generosity, and he fell into debt. All of his sons had died, and he was given the bad advice that he should marry again and try to produce an heir. But there was no result in the union. Somehow, he maintained his status despite the heavy debt. However, the elephant Shivchandra died. The horse was sold. The horse carriage also, and only a goat cart remained. The Durga festival could only be celebrated by taking out loans. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur recalls the recitation of Mahabharata and Ramayana at the festivals. When there was recitation of the Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., at the old house, I would go to hear. I like to hear about Hanuman crossing the ocean to Lanka and about the demons Simhika. The honorable reciter will speak with specific accompanying gestures, and in my mind, a great love would arise. I will make a regular habit of going to hear the reading after school. Again, we can observe the boy's strong, spontaneous attraction for hearing the Lord's activities in lieu of the usual attraction to childish sports and play. Marriage studies in Calcutta. Upon his reaching the age of 12, his mother arranged a marriage with a 5-year-old girl from Ranagat named Sayamani, the daughter of Sri Yukta Madhusudhan Mishra. How many years? Eh? Bhaktivinoda Thakur was 12 years old, and the wife was 5 years. She hoped to improve the family fortunes by this arrangement. Childhood marriages were not uncommon at that time in Bengal. Such marriages were generally arranged by astrological calculation so that the partners would be compatible, and the couple usually came from similar family backgrounds. The psychological reasoning behind these early marriages was that a girl in Vedic culture would feel secure, knowing that her future was arranged and her protection are guaranteed. The couple did not generally live together until they reached adulthood. A grand wedding was held, which Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur compares to a child's doll marriage. There was a pleasure boat, a wedding palanquin, decorations, light, English music, etc. The marriage took place between a 12-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, and was exactly like a child's doll marriage. Drinking Ganges water and milk, I arrived at the house of my father-in-law with a great festive crowd. The reception was huge. Many gentlemen of the Teli oil castes, dressed in bright and varied clothes and wearing jari outfit, came to the reception. Even though I was of such a tender age, I was able to understand that except for the Kayastas and the Brahmanas, who were dressed nicely, the good clothes and ornament did not look well on the others. Two reciters of genealogies read out the family histories of the Mitra and Datta families, and the marriage was gradually concluded. I said that I was not able to stay alone in the house of my father-in-law. Kedranath's nanny came to stay at his father-in-law's house to care for him, and he was accepted there just like a family member. His maternal grandfather subsequently died at Bhavanipur, where he had gone after his fortunes had utterly failed. Thereafter, we went to Calcutta by boat to spend some time in nearby Bhavanipur. In those days, Calcutta was a fearful place. Immediately upon arriving, my nose was assailed by a severe foul smell. This stench took away my appetite. After residing in Bhavanipura for a few days, we visited numerous places in Calcutta and Bhavanipura. We saw Kali Ghat, where Goddess Kali is worshipped. Being exceedingly disgusted, I was not able to appreciate anything. When we returned to Ula, I was the first to leave. Upon arriving in Ula, Mahesh Dada, Major Mani, and her brother, Raja Bahu, performed Shraddha, the funeral rite for my grandfather. Kedranath then returned to Ula and tried to manage the Kedranath returned to Ula and tried to manage the shambles of his grandfather's estate. He was not well suited to do it, being young and inexperienced, but by various means, family debts were paid off. However, it seemed that there was never enough money, and his family experienced suffering on this account, being so much accustomed to a comfortable existence. The Takora recounts, everybody thought that my mother had a lot of money and jewelry, except for a few properties. All her wealth was lost. At that time, my father went to Murasidabad. He took 1,500 rupees from my mother. That money was lost. On another occasion, my father went to extricate one of the sons of Mukherjee from some difficulty and loaned 2,500 rupees from my mother's family, with the security of jewelry to that end. Most of that money was never repaid. My wedding cost almost 2,000 rupees, and my mother paid 1,000 rupees of the expenses. In this way, there were numerous expenses and no money remained in my mother's hand. I was in complete anxiety. My grandfather's house was huge. The guards were few, and I was afraid of thieves at night. I thus gave the guard bamboo rod to carry. In this regard, I was not lax. When Kedranath was 14, his maternal uncle, the famous Bengali poet Kasi Prasad Ghosh, came for a visit. Kasi Prasad was a journalist and the editor of the Hindu Intelligencer, a weekly journal. He was a literary luminary of his time, and his home was a meeting place of many famous figures of the Calcutta literary scene. Many aspiring writers came to him to be trained in effective English composition. He counted among his friends the Englishman, Major Richardson, commonly known as Shakespeare Richardson, who was a noted author and journalist, as well as having been the aide-de-camp to Lord William Bentinck, who in his time had wielded tremendous influence and power in the development of British affairs in India. Kasi Prasad tested the English reading and writing of Kedranath, was impressed with his intelligence, and gave him a mirror as a prize. Kedranath's maternal aunt suggested to his mother that he go to Calcutta to pursue his studies. His aunt reasoned with his mother that she would care for him as though he were her own son, and it was thus decided that Kedranath would go to Calcutta for his education. Arriving in Calcutta after the puja season, Kedranath stayed in the house of Kasi Prasad. He had very thick pillars and was situated on the northern side of a pond called Heduya. On the banks of the Heduya were the homes of missionaries, the Church of Krishna Bandhu, Queen's College, and the Beaton School. It was a beautiful and aristocratic section of Calcutta. Kedranath was enrolled in the Hindu Charitable Institution School. He studied there for 4 years, from 1852 to 1856, constantly reading and studying literature with Ishwara Chandra Nandi, in whom he had great faith. He described that gentleman as truthful, in control of his senses, religious, knowledgeable in the Shastras, and well spoken. The British were interested in creating a generation of Indians whose native ways would be transformed by education. In the famous education brief written in 1835, Thomas Macaulay put forward his argument succinctly, if arrogantly. To sum up what I have said, I think it is clear that we are free to employ our funds as we choose, that we ought to employ them in teaching what is best worth knowing, that English is better worth knowing than Sanskrit or Arabic, that the natives were desirous to be taught English and are not desirous to be taught Sanskrit or Arabic, that neither as the languages of law nor as the languages of religion have the Sanskrit and Arabic any peculiar claim to our encouragement, that it is possible to make natives of this country thoroughly good English scholars, and that to this end our effort ought to be directed. In one point, I fully agree with the gentleman to whose general views I am opposed. I feel with them that it is impossible for us, with our limited means, to attempt to educate the body of people. We must at present do our best to form a class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with themes of science and borrowed from our Western nomenclature, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of the population. Many Indians began to take advantage of this policy, but it was ultimately to be one of the major factors in the undoing of the British Raj, as the very intellectuals produced by British education were to later establish an independence movement that drove the British from India. During the annual examination, Kedranath won first prize and obtained a medal. In his first year there, however, during the rainy season, the boy fell sick with blood, dysentery, fever, itching skin, etc. Becoming very weak, he returned with some resident of Ola for a visit to his home. Since his illness was complicated, his mother spoke to a leader worker who said he knew a fakir who could cure him. A fakir named Chandra arrived. Using bacchus leaves, he performed an exorcism and gave Kedranath gura leaves to eat. He gave Kedranath a mantra to chant and told his mother to feed him only vegetables and rice cooked with ripe tamarind in particular. He told Kedranath that in a dream something will be revealed. A dream came to Kedranath in which a black snake crawled out of his body. The fakir was satisfied that Kedranath was out of danger. He told him to continue with the mantra and to never eat any demigod prasadam. The fakir then took him to his guru, a former cobbler whose name was Golok. Golok belonged to a branch of the Karta Bhaja sect. This particular group accepts the moral restrictions of strict Vaishnavaism, but their electric beliefs and philosophical conclusions are ultimately impersonal, for they think the formless absolute to be the highest manifestation of transcendence. Nonetheless, the Guru had many supernatural powers, and Kedranath was impressed by him. The Guru assured Kedranath that his itching, as well as all the symptoms of his other diseases, would be completely eradicated. In a subsequent dream, calcium powder was prescribed as the treatment for the sores, and in no time the ailment cleared up. Kedranath's body filled out and became healthy again. He continued chanting the mantra given to him and often went to see his guru. One day the guru predicted that Kedranath's boyhood home, Ula, would soon be almost entirely destroyed. The people there will die from fever and disease. He also predicted that Kedranath will become a great Vaishnava. Both predictions would prove to be true. After this impressive recovery, he took his mother and sister to Kolkata and arranged a marriage for his sister. Then, his mother and sister returned to Ola. Kedranath studied all of the books in Kasi Prasad's library and assisted Kasi Prasad by reading to him all the articles which were submitted for publication in his magazines and newspapers. He also availed himself freely of the public library. He began to contribute articles to the library gazette and the Intelligencer, which were edited by Kasi Prasad, and began the composition of the first two books of the Purana, an epic poem, which he intended to complete in 12 volumes. These two books were completed before he turned 18. He joined various debating clubs and freely exchanged thought on spiritual and literary topics with Krishnadas Pal, Debendranath Tagore, and his two sons, Dwijendranath Tagore, who Kedarnath came to count as his closest friend, and Satyendranath Tagore, brother of the poet Rabindranath Tagore, as well as many other figures who later became famous in different phases of influence. About Dwijendranath Tagore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur recalls, the Honorable Dwijendranath Tagore was the older brother of my friend, Sri Yukta Satyendranath Tagore, and my older brother as well. If ever among men there was a close friend, then Barodada, older brother, is that close friend. He was charitable, of good character, pure-hearted, and honest, and my heart was enlivened by him. Upon seeing him, all my trouble would go away. In his association, Kedarnath studied the works of many Western philosophers, as well as the controversial views of the Brahma Samaj, led by Ram Mohan Rai, which were promulgated by the Tagore family. Kedarnath also met regularly with an open-hearted Christian missionary named Reverend Duff. I had frequent discussions with him and read many books in his association. He also studied the works of Addison and Edward Young in association of another missionary named Reverend Greaves. Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Okay. I will take break. I want to continue. Huh? Okay, college. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's college days. College days. Yes, no. Okay, college days as well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Did you see how much labor he went through and all the preparations he's making, all the sacrifices he's making for us? Are you seeing? He's making a lot of sacrifice. Kedarnath developed talent as philosopher and a debater. In the year 1856, he enrolled in the Hindu school, or what later came to be known as the University of Calcutta. Kedarnath became the student of Ishwara Chandra Vidyasagar, a reputed scholar and the author of Samagra Vyakarana Kaumudi. In that year, a university was started and classes were held in the Presidency College. The senior classes of the Hindu school were held in the West Wing. Sanskrit College was in the middle section, and junior classes were held in the East Wing. Kedarnath began to write poetry, for which he was much respected and praised, and which gradually came to the attention of the principal. Which age? Which age? 15. Bhaktivinoda Thakur at 15 is doing this. An English named George Thompson, a former member of parliament, taught him the art of oratory. Mr. Thompson told Kedarnath that he used to deliver lectures to the cornfields on his way from his house to parliament, pretending that the plants were the members of parliament. He would speak freely to them, and in this way had become an expert and pleasing speaker. Kedarnath also pursued his studies privately by spending time at libraries like Metcalfe Hall and being tutored by the Christian missionaries. Kedarnath's friend, Sri Taraknath Pandit, who bore the expenses for establishing the science college, invited him to speak at the British Indian Society, which many pro-British Zamindars and Europeans attended. Kedarnath was invited to become a member, and he eventually gave a lecture there concerning the evolution of matter through the material mode of goodness. At the end of 1856, he had completed part 1 of the Parade, which was an account in epic verse form of the wanderings of Porus, who fought Alexander the Great in the Christian era. It was well received by his teachers. We see the continuing thread of existential questioning appearing in the pages of his epic. When Porus, the hero, shouts a deer and then begins to feel the sorrow inherent in material life. Now, sad reflection clouds his mental realm, and questions past our thought hit his heart overwhelmed. From whom is life, and whence this frame of man? What mighty power has formed this mighty plan? Why live we here? And why desire and fear? For what we turn with time's revolving wheel? I eat and live and sleep and spend the day, but never think of this. My life is gay. From this awakening hour I let my eyes select my will, led by the guiding skies. This day I live my ever gorgeous race to visit lands extending in the west. Ye woods, be witness, I my country leave, and come not back until my end achieved. Reverend Dove instructed him in the works of Milton at this time, and at the house of a missionary, he read the works of Chadley, Hazlitt, and others. His poems were published in the Literary Gazette. Some of his classmates called him Mr. ABC. He also studied the Quran and the works of Theodore Parker, Channing, and Newman. Kedarnath decided to go to Ula to visit his family, spending a night with his in-laws. He left by boat for his home. There was a great storm that night, but somehow he reached the Ghat at Ula safely. The next day, by the grace of God, he reached the landing at Ula without mishap. In the late evening, in the month of Ashvin, the light of the moon was very splendid there. Prior to that evening, I had received no news of Ula. That year, there was a fearful epidemic in the village of Ula. The family of Mahesh Dada had come to Calcutta in the month of Bhadra because they were ill but had not said anything to me. Upon disembarking, I saw some people who, being mad with the happiness which comes from hopelessness. We were laughing and joking. The village was empty, as they were under the influence of ganja, marijuana. They perceived no suffering. I questioned them, but they gave no answers. My friend and I were amazed by the sight of them. Departing from the boat, we went to the house of Madhusudan. When we looked through the door, we saw Madhusudan Basu sitting on a low wooden seat. I paid respect to him and he addressed me saying, "Oh Kedar, stay here for the rest of the day. Go to your house in the morning." There had been an outbreak of cholera and many persons have died. Generally, within 4 or 5 hours of symptoms first appearing. The word of the mystic Guru had come true. Hearing this on his arrival, Kedranath wanted to proceed to his house to know the situation fully. When he arrived, he learned that his sister had died. His mother and paternal grandmother were there in great distress, and his mother, though recovering, had been delirious for many days. Ula was the scene of a great disaster. Hundreds had died. Some of the villagers were blaming the epidemic on the tantric brahmachari whom Kedranath used to visit. They foolishly theorized that a goat which he had freed to take the fever out of the village had actually spread it. Taking his mother and grandmother in a boat, Kedranath proceeded to Ranagat, the home of his wife, and heard the news that she had also been ill, but was recovering. The Thakura recalls, "The day before we departed, I went to many places in Ulagram. In a great number of homes, there were no people left alive. At some homes, there was heard the cry of pain of those who were sick. At some homes, there were bodies lying around. At another homes, there was little life. Some of the survivors were making preparation to leave Ula. Many had already left. It was the time of Durga Puja, but there was no happiness anywhere." Staying at the house of his uncle, Kali Krishna, in Calcutta, Kedranath cared for his mother and grandmother. Times were difficult. He had no money and there were great hardships. He tried to make the college entrance examination but was unable to prepare properly in an atmosphere of anxiety about his family members. Then he began to get recurrent fevers, which were finally cured by his taking quinine. Although suffering from financial deprivation and recurrent illness, Kedranath did not reveal his troubles to others. He continued to meet with his friends, especially Dwijendranath Tagore. At that time, he read many books with his friend on the science of God and religion, including Sanskrit books, as well as Western philosophers like Kant, Goethe, Hegel, Swedenborg, Hume, Schopenhauer, Voltaire, etc. This helped remove the anxiety from his heart. He gave a philosophical discourse to the British Indian Society, which was taught very deep by the Englishmen present. Yet, a teacher of Kedranath's, Mr. Dhira, raised a question which Kedranath took seriously. How will the acquisition of such knowledge benefit mankind? At another meeting of the British Indian Society, Kedranath recited the 25 stories of the Betala, a type of ghost that inhabit corpses, which he had translated from the Betala Pancha Vansati of Somadev in the form of a play in English. His recitation was followed by a great debate, and from that day, his contemporaries began to broadcast his glories as a logician. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a young scholar, he received a similar reputation as a master of nine, or logic, and was thus known as Nimoy Pandit. No one in the Vaishnava assembly at the meetings of Advaita Acharya and Srivas Pandit had any notion that he would prove to be the greatest Vaishnava. Such was the case with Kedranath. As a logician, no one could defeat him, but this was not his true glory. The time for his manifesting his actual glories was yet to come. Just as the exalted position of a divine being, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada was not fully revealed until later in his life, when the time, place, and circumstances were appropriate, and Krishna utilized him for the purpose of which he brought him to the world. Kedranath was fascinated by theism, and he spent his time studying the Bible, the Quran, and the works of Parker and Newman. He developed deep faith in Jesus Christ. Whatever he read, he discussed with Dwijendranath. The Sepoy Mutiny occurred at this time. He read the newspaper every evening in the Tagore's parlor, and learned the news before it was published by hearing the many discussions that took place there. The Thakur does not dwell upon the uprising in his autobiography, but there was much discussion and agitation in Calcutta's intellectual circles at the time, as many of the Sepoy rebels were Bengali soldiers. Calcutta also served as a haven for both British and Indians who fled the horrors of the rebellion. The background of the mutiny was that the British, through their aggressive annexations, their construction of intimidating public works, their vigorous promotion of British-style education, their contempt for the traditions of casteism and other ancient customs, and above all, their all too common disdain for the Indians as a race, were igniting feelings of resentment among large sections of the Indian people. A contemporarily educated Indian critic declared, "The British government professes to educate the natives to an equality with Europeans, an object worthy of the age and of British. But if Englishmen, after educating the natives to be their equals, continue to treat them as their inferiors, if they deny the stimulus to honorable ambitions and show the native that there is a barrier over which superior native merit and ambition can never hope to pass. Are they not, in effect, undoing all that they have done? On teaching the native all that he has been taught, and pursuing a suicidal policy which will inevitably array all the talent, honor, and intelligence of the country ultimately in irreconcilable hostility to the ruling power. This analysis later proved to be correct. The civil mutiny stemmed from a multiplicity of underlying currents of dissatisfaction and fears. Some groundless, some decidedly not. But the spark that ignited the Great Mutiny Sepoy Rebellion was the introduction of the Enfield rifle. The Indian Sepoy soldiers were expected to bite upon the end of cartridges, which were rumored to be coated with beef and pork fat. This greatly offended both the Hindus and the Muslims. When 85 Indian soldiers in Meerut were publicly dishonored and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for refusing to use the cartridges, there was open and murderous rebellion. 3 Sepoy segments revolted, killed their British officers and their families, who chanced to be on their way to church, and beheaded and then headed for Delhi. The revolt spread, and Delhi, Lucknow, and Kanpur fell to the rebels, who massacred every European they could lay hands on. However, by March of 1858, reconquest by the British and those Indian regiments that remained loyal was complete. During this period of turmoil, there was much bravery on both sides and ultimately unexcusable act of revenge. Some reforms followed, however, with some genuine attempt to assuage Indian sentiment, and the transfer of power was made from the East Indian Company to the British Crown. Visiting Burdwan, Kedarnath got the opportunity to stay with the king, Maharaj Pratap Chandra, at the time of Dola Yatra. He presented the king with a copy of his Parade, and the king read part of it and liked it very much. Kedarnath returned to Calcutta with many ambitions, but no money or help were available to him. He recalls, upon returning from Burdwan, I saw that my maternal grandmother was bedridden at Uncle Kali's house. I was thinking many things, such as, I will study, I will make money, I will print books, I will lecture in many places, I will get somewhere where my mother and grandmother and my wife can all live together. But there was no money, no help. Everyone was a calculating outsider. No one made even a little effort to help. He was then persuaded, against his better judgment, to go on an excursion by rail. Upon returning, I was put to shame. I was thinking of enjoying an excursion, but what was the condition of my grandmother? That I did not know. When I returned to Kali Kaka's house in the afternoon, I saw mother calling me from the doorway. Go at once to the Ghat and the Ganga. Your uncle Kali took your grandmother there. I was wearing only one piece of cloth, but I went swiftly to Nimatal Ghat. There I saw my grandmother, and Kali Kaka was performing Antarajali, final ablutions. Her finally suffering was unbearable, and thus there was much benefit for her in dying. When I lived in Ula, she was very good to me. I read Kali Kaivalya Dayini and other books with her. You could not find a woman who was as frugal as she, and who would pay much painstaking attention to details. She would make various kinds of dishes and sweets. What she knew of the culinary art, no others knew. His wife, then 12 years old and living at Ranagat, begged Kadranath to be allowed to come and stay with him in Calcutta. He assured her that she would come when he had employment. He got a job as a second-grade teacher in the Hindu Charitable Institution School, which he had earlier attended, at a pay of 15 rupees per month. He was about 19 at this time. It was 1857, and the height of the Sepoy Mutiny. Kedranath rented a house for his mother and wife, and furnished it with one cot, 2 canopy beds, 1 table, 2 chairs, and 1 cloth rack. But he could not maintain the expenses. His mother had to sell a gold necklace to pay the back rent. Kedranath continued his writing and somehow managed to publish the 2nd volume of the Parai. During this time, he met an elderly, eccentric English poetess named Miss Loki, who very much appreciated Kedranath's poetry. She was a spiritualist and would show various ghostly manifestations. Srila Bhaktivinoda reports, she would have spirits come and dance on her table. She could see the spirit, but I could only hear the sound of their dancing. He dedicated books, one of the Parai to her with the word, to Mrs. E. Locke, authoress of Leisure Hours, etc., etc. This book is most respectfully inscribed by her obliged and obedient servant, the author. It is not stated in his biography whether or not she helped him publish his book, but he clearly felt some measure of obligation as above expressed. Kedranath was trying his best to secure employment, and he applied for the post of accountant with a sugar merchant who attempted to give him some training. The young man was surprised to see the cheating involved. When I purchase a large quantity of sugar, I obtain an extra sack of sugar. I notice this and consider it irreligious to cheat. I therefore informed the merchant. The merchant advised him that it would be better for him to get a job as a teacher. That business life would be difficult for one of his principles. You understand? He want to get a job with a businessman. So bhaktivinoda Thakur noticed that anytime he buys sugar from the man will put extra bag there for him. So when he discovered, Bhaktivinoda Thakur discovered that this man is putting extra bag, and he didn't pay for it. He's putting. So he went back to tell the man that, see, I bought 5 bags of sugar. There is 6 bags. Can you take it back? The man told him, the merchant advised him that it would be better for him to get a job as a teacher, that business life would be difficult for one of his principles. You understand? The man is telling him that you cannot do business because business requires cheating, and you cannot cheat. Therefore, you don't do business. You don't be a good businessman. You better do teaching than to do business. Hare Krishna. So about to note Takuraki. So it's 10 o'clock. Yes. Okay.